Moving on, we turn to the financial status of the Detroit Public Schools. The district's fiscal year just ended, $238 million in the hole. And as the Michigan Department of Education meets to tackle the DPS deficit, national experts in school reform are visiting the city. They were invited by Excellent Schools Detroit, and I spoke with CEO Dan Varner about what advice the education experts are offering. All right, Dan, there's no shortage of national interest into the education of what's happening in the city of Detroit. Recently, you had two national groups in from the Fordham Institute and also from the Charter School Growth Fund. What were their assessments of what's happening in Detroit right now?
Happily, people on the left and the right politically agree on kind of the current state of affairs in Detroit and on some of the things that should be done to improve the quality of education in Detroit. So their assessment, like those that we've heard from lots of other folks, both on the right and the left, nationally and locally, is that the unregulated marketplace of schools in Detroit, while providing lots of options for parents, does little to improve school quality. And that there are ways to ensure that parents and families have the ability to choose quality schools while at the same time, or to choose schools, while at the same time improving the quality of schools overall. And so those two folks they really came to share with some Republican legislators and charter school advocates and so on that part of what has to happen in Detroit is that we have to put in place some kind of a universal enrollment system that actually makes the exercise of school choice transparent and equitable and allows schools to more effectively plan for the number of students they're going to have, and that we have to have a way in this city and in this state of closing low-performing schools, particularly low-performing charter schools, actually was their message. The folks at the Charter School Growth Fund and at the Fordham Institute both believe that you can't improve the quality of charter school education if you're not willing to close the worst performing of them.
It might even be frustrating for parents to hear when you start talking about what's happening on the right and the left. The people say this shouldn't even be political at all.
Agreed. Well, it shouldn't be, I would argue, and in fact it doesn't have to be in this particular case. There's lots to agree on here for many different reasons, but there are lots of things to agree on and that we do generally agree on at this point. So we've here locally, with the work of the Coalition on the Future Detroit School Children, and the governor's announcement shortly thereafter, we do have some rough outlines of an agreement in place around what kind of things should be done. There does need to be some kind of office created that would be responsible for opening, closing, and citing Detroit schools, whatever the governance type. We do need a universal enrollment system. We're going to have to do something about relieving the DPS debt burden that has been carried for on and on. So there are lots of things that there is general agreement on. We've just got to get to working out the details of them.
All right, so what are we waiting for then?
Well, we're waiting on this legislature. We had big roads issue to get taken care of this spring, as you know, and we also had to get a budget passed. But with any luck at all, this will be a primary issue, maybe even the most important issue on the agenda for the legislature when they reconvene this fall. And certainly, as far as I'm concerned and other stakeholders are concerned, this should be the most important issue on the agenda this fall.
What are you hearing so far in terms of movement?
Not much. There's lots of, the really difficult issue, perhaps the most difficult issue for folks to figure out is how to handle the DPS debt. As you know, the Coalition on the Future Detroit School Children, of which I'm a part, did come forward with the recommendation that the state is going to have to assume that debt. And while I can't speak on behalf of the coalition, there are co-chairs who are responsible for that. That recommendation was met with kind of understanding by the governor's office and increasingly by legislators that DPS isn't going to manage its way out of the debt. The debt has continued to grow, has grown while the district's been under state management. In fact, the state has been managing the district for almost all of the accumulation of that debt. And so something else is going to have to be done, and folks are wrestling with how to handle that, I would say, is the primary thing that's the stumbling block at this point.
You have so many people assessing what's happening in the city of Detroit in terms of education, whether it is charter school and taking a look at DPS, and obviously knowing that all of them are connected in some way. When do you finally stop and say, okay, enough assessment, enough experts from around the country coming in and giving their 2 cents of what we should or should not do? It's time for some action now.
Oh, I think we're at that point, Christy. I really do. We've had years of data at Excellent Schools Detroit. We've been looking at this information for the better part of 4.5 or 5 years now, and the trend lines are clear and obvious. We've had lots of national experts who've weighed in, lots of local experts who've weighed in. We've all basically reached the same conclusion that the system isn't working. When you look at the data around student performance and student academic achievement, those trend lines are flat at best. Even as a state, the trend lines are not good. And so I think we all know that education needs to be fixed in the state. And we have the outlines of a broad agreement around what could be done to improve education. At this point, it's about really the brass tacks work of hammering out the details.